My father didn't scream when he asked me to ruin my life. He just slid a false confession across the kitchen island. He looked me in the eye and said that 2 years in prison would not kill me. He spoke as if a felony conviction was a flu bug I just needed to sweat out for the family's sake. They expected a daughter who would fold, but they forgot I was the one who always checked the receipts. My life in Briar Glen was built on the architecture of silence. I had constructed it carefully, brick by quiet brick. Over the 5 years since I stopped answering my mother's panic-stricken phone calls on the first ring, at 33, I was the operations coordinator for Hawthorne Medical Supply. It was a title that sounded boring to most people, and that was exactly why I loved it. My days were measured in shipping manifests, inventory spreadsheets, and the rhythmic hum of the label printer. There were no emergencies that could not be solved with a tracking number. There were no sudden emotional detonations. It was clean. It was mine. I was sitting at my desk, double-checking a discrepancy in a shipment of nitrile gloves. When the silence broke, it did not break with a crash, but with the heavy, confident footfalls of 2 men walking past the receptionist without waiting to be announced. I looked up. They were wearing cheap suits that fit poorly around the shoulders, the kind of attire that signaled government work rather than corporate management. One was older, with a face that looked like it had been eroded by decades of bad coffee and lies. The other was younger, trying too hard to look impassive. "Ellie Russell," the older one said. It was not a question. I stood up, my hand instinctively hovering over my keyboard as if I could delete them by hitting escape. "Yes," I said. "Can I help you? We are Detective Miller and Detective Vance, Briar Glen PD. We have a warrant to seize your electronic devices, and we need you to come down to the station for questioning regarding an ongoing investigation into felony fraud and embezzlement." The office went dead still. I could feel the eyes of the billing department burning into the back of my neck. My boss, Greg, stepped out of his office, his mouth open in a perfect O of confusion. "Fraud?" I asked. The word tasted metallic in my mouth. There must be a mistake. I pay my taxes. I have a 700 credit score. I do not even return library books late. The younger detective, Vance, stepped forward. He held out a piece of paper. "This is not about library books, Ms. Russell. This is about the Briar Glen Renewal Fund." I stared at him. The Renewal Fund was a local nonprofit. They fixed up playgrounds and ran after-school programs. I had donated $20 to their bake sale 3 years ago. That was the extent of my relationship with them. "I do not understand," I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. "We have records indicating that over the last 18 months, you have authorized invoices and received funds totaling $85,000 through a vendor operating under the name North Pine Consulting." Miller said. He said it loudly enough for the entire room to hear. North Pine Consulting. The name meant nothing to me. It sounded like a generic shell company from a bad movie. "I have never heard of that company," I said. Miller smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. It was a smile of a man who had heard every lie in the book and was bored by them. "We have emails from your personal account approving the invoices. Ellie, we have the bank records. The account the money went to? It is in your name. Social security number, current address, signature card. It is all there." I felt the blood drain from my face, rushing down to my feet, leaving me lightheaded. My knees hit the underside of my desk. "That is impossible," I whispered. "Please turn over your phone and step away from the computer," Vance said. I did as I was told. I watched them bag my phone, my lifeline, my calendar, my connection to the sane world, into a clear plastic evidence bag. As they marched me out of the office, past the horrified faces of coworkers I had eaten lunch with for 4 years, I realized that the architecture of silence I had built was not made of brick. It was made of glass, and someone had just thrown a rock through it. The interrogation was a blur of circular questions. They showed me printouts of emails sent from an address that looked like mine, ellierussell.88@gmail.com, but I had stopped using that account 4 years ago because it was overrun with spam. They showed me invoices, They were beautiful. Professional invoices with crisp logos and perfect formatting. North Pine Consulting. Services rendered. Community outreach strategy. Grant writing assistance. Strategic planning. The dates spanned the last year and a half. Every month. $4,000 here. $5,000 there. I sat in the metal chair. Shivering despite the heat of the room, I kept repeating the same 3 sentences. I did not do this. I do not know North Pine. That is not my signature. Miller pointed to a photocopy of a bank signature card. It looks like your signature. Ellie, look at the loop on the L. Look at the way the R trails off. I looked. He was right. It did look like my signature, but it looked like my signature from 10 years ago. Back when I used to sign things with a flourish I had since abandoned for efficiency. I want a lawyer, I said finally. They let me go, pending further investigation. But they kept my phone and my laptop. I walked out of the precinct into the late afternoon sun. Feeling naked, I had to walk 3 miles home because I could not call an Uber. When I finally got to my apartment, a second-floor walk-up that smelled of lemon polish and safety, I locked the door and slid the deadbolt home. I sank onto the floor of the entryway and put my head in my hands. $85,000, felony fraud, prison time. I needed to think. I needed to figure out who had enough of my personal information to open a bank account in my name. My mind raced through the possibilities of identity theft, a data breach, a lost wallet. Then the doorbell rang. I froze. I was not expecting anyone. I approached the peephole slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked through the glass. It was my mother, Marla, and standing behind her, looking at his watch, was my father. Kent, they were not supposed to be here. We had a strict arrangement, an unspoken treaty. We saw each other on major holidays and birthdays. We texted regarding the weather. They did not drop by. I opened the door. Ellie, honey, my mother cried out. She bustled in before I could even say hello, carrying a heavy Pyrex dish covered in aluminum foil. The smell of garlic and oregano filled the hallway. We heard you had a hard day. We brought lasagna. My father followed her in, shutting the door firmly behind him. He locked it. I watched him turn the deadbolt, and a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature went down my spine. How did you know? I asked. I just got home. I have not told anyone. News travels fast in a small town. My father said. He took off his coat and draped it over my pristine armchair. He looked around the apartment with a critical eye, checking for dust, checking for cracks. My mother was already in the kitchen, opening drawers, looking for forks. Sit down. Sweetie, you look pale. You need to eat. You never eat enough when you get stressed. Remember when you were in high school and you failed that chemistry test? You stopped eating for 3 days. I did not fail that test. I said automatically, I got a B-. Sit, my father commanded. I sat at the small round table in my dining nook. My mother slammed a massive slice of lasagna onto a plate and placed it in front of me. The steam rose up, suffocating me. We need to talk about this situation, my father said, sitting opposite me. He clasped his hands on the table. His knuckles were hairy and thick. He looked like a man who had spent his life pushing heavy things around, which, as a contractor, he had. What situation? I asked, playing dumb. I wanted to hear them say it. The fraud. Ellie. The renewal fund. My mother said. She sat down next to me, too close. She put a hand on my arm. Her palm was hot and damp. We know about the detectives. I looked from one to the other. Their faces were composed, serious, but there was a bizarre energy radiating from them. They were not shocked. They were not asking me if I was innocent. They were managed. They looked like they were following a script. I am innocent. I said, I do not know who did this, but I'm going to find out. I am going to get a lawyer and— No, my father said sharply. No lawyers. I blinked. What? Lawyers just complicate things. Ellie, they drain your money and they drag things out. This needs to be handled quietly, within the family. I laughed. A sharp, hysterical sound. Dad, the police came to my job. They have a warrant. This is not a family dispute. This is a felony investigation. I cannot handle this quietly. My mother squeezed my arm harder. Her nails dug into my skin. Ellie, listen to us. We have been thinking about this all afternoon. We have a solution. She reached into her oversized tote bag, the one she usually carried knitting projects in, and pulled out a navy blue folder. She placed it on the table between the lasagna and the salt shaker. "What is that?" I asked. My father leaned forward. His voice dropped to a low, serious register. It was the voice he used when he was explaining why a renovation was going to cost $5,000 more than the estimate. "Look, Elle, we know you did not mean to hurt anyone. We know things get tight. Maybe you got over your head." I stared at him. "I am not over my head. I have savings. I have a job. I did not steal $85,000. "It does not matter what you did or did not do," my father said. Cutting me off, "What matters is the evidence. They have the emails. They have the bank account. They have you dead to rights." He was not listening. He did not care that I was innocent. "So, here is the reality," he continued. "If you fight this, they will drag you through the mud. They will put your face on the front page of the paper every day for a year. You will lose your job. You will lose your apartment. And in the end, you will probably go to jail for 5, maybe 10 years. Prosecutors hate it when you waste their time." I felt like I was drowning. "So what? I just roll over?" My mother opened the folder. Inside was a stack of typed papers. "We spoke to a friend," she said, "a family friend who knows the legal system. He drafted this for you." I looked down at the document. The title at the top read, "Statement of Allocation and Acceptance of Responsibility." It was a confession. I read the first paragraph. "I, Eleanor Marie Russell, hereby admit that I acted alone in the creation of the entity known as North Pine Consulting." My hands started to shake. "You want me to sign this? It is the best way." "Ellie," my mother said, her voice pleading, "if you sign this, and you turn yourself in tomorrow, our friend says the prosecutor will go easy on you. They just want the case closed. They want the money back." "The money back?" I looked up. "I do not have the money. I never took it. We will handle the restitution," my father said. He sat back, looking magnanimous. "We will take out a second mortgage. We will pay back the $85,000. We will make the problem go away. All you have to do is take the rap." I felt sick. The lasagna smelled like garbage. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you want me to confess to something I did not do?" My father sighed. He looked at my mother, then back at me. "Ellie, look at the big picture. You are single. You have no kids. You rent your apartment, if you go away for a little while. What do you really lose?" I stared at him, unable to process the cruelty of the question. "I lose my life. I lose my reputation. I lose my freedom." 2 years. "Ellie," he said, "that is what the guidelines say for a plea deal with restitution. Maybe 18 months with good behavior. You can do that standing on your head." Then he said it. The line that would ring in my ears for the rest of my life. 2 years in prison won't kill you. I pushed my chair back. The legs screeched against the hardwood floor. "You are insane. Both of you. Get out." "Ellie, wait," my mother cried. She grabbed the folder and held it up. "Think about Dylan." I froze. Dylan, my older brother, the golden boy, the one who had failed out of 3 colleges and still somehow ended up as the sales manager at the biggest car dealership in the county. "What about Dylan?" I asked. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "If this investigation drags on, if they start digging into everyone's finances, Dylan cannot handle that kind of pressure. You know how he is. He is fragile right now. He is up for a promotion. If his name gets dragged into a fraud case..." I looked at her, and the pieces clicked together with a terrifying sound. "Dylan," I said. "North Pine Consulting." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Do not say his name. This is not about him. This is about you doing the right thing for this family for once in your life." "For once in my life?" I shouted. "I have been cleaning up your messes since I was 12. I did your taxes when I was in high school. I bailed Dylan out of jail when he got that DUI, and we put a roof over your head, my father shouted back. We fed you. We clothed you. And now, when we ask for one sacrifice, one act of loyalty, you act like a selfish brat. I looked down at the confession in the folder. I forced myself to look at the details. I needed to focus on the facts, or I was going to scream. I saw an address listed for North Pine Consulting, 412 Cedar Lane. I had never lived there. I saw a date listed for one of the alleged invoice creations, October 14th of last year. Wait, I said. I pointed to the date, October 14th. I was not even in the state on October 14th. I was in Pennsylvania for the Regional Supply Chain Conference. I have hotel receipts. I have badge scans. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Details. The police will not care about dates if you confess. They just want the win. But I cannot confess to being in Briar Glen when I was in Pennsylvania. It is a lie. My father stood up. He loomed over me. You are going to sign this paper. Ellie, you are going to sign it, and you are going to take it to the district attorney tomorrow morning. Or what? I asked, standing my ground, though my legs were trembling. Or you are dead to us, he said. Cold, final, and not just us. We will tell Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike that you stole the money and tried to pin it on us. We will tell the whole town what a liar you are. We will make sure that by the time you try to fight this in court, you won't have a single character witness left in this zip code. I looked at my mother. She was not crying anymore. She was watching me with a hard, expectant look. She was waiting for me to fold. She was waiting for the reliable, quiet Ellie to fix the problem. Get out, I said. My father grabbed the folder. Think about it. Ellie, we will be back tomorrow morning. If you are smart, you will have that signed. He grabbed his coat. My mother left the lasagna. They walked out the door. My father didn't look back. My mother paused for a split second, looking at the doorframe, and said, It is just 2 years. Honey, it will go by like a blink. Then the door clicked shut. I stood there for a long time. The silence rushed back in. But it was not peaceful anymore. It was heavy and suffocating. I locked the deadbolt. Then I dragged a dining chair over and wedged it under the doorknob. I went into the bathroom and vomited. When I was done, I washed my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked the same as I had that morning, but my eyes looked older. I went to the living room and grabbed my laptop bag. Then I remembered the police had my laptop. I cursed. I paced around the apartment. I needed information. I needed to see what they had done. I went to my closet and dug out an old iPad I hadn't used in 3 years. I plugged it in and waited for it to charge. Watching the battery icon blink red, it felt like it took hours. Finally, it booted up. I sat at the kitchen table, pushing the cold lasagna aside. I connected to the Wi-Fi. My hands were shaking so bad I mistyped my password 3 times. I navigated to a credit monitoring site. I had to reset my password because I couldn't remember it. I waited for the verification email to come to my work email, which I could still access via the web Outlook portal. I got in. I pulled up my full credit report. I scrolled past my student loans, past my car payment, past my credit card, and there it was. Trade line added. 14 months ago. Small business loan. Lender. First National of Briar Glen. Status. Current. I clicked on the details. The address on the account was my parents' house. I kept scrolling. I looked at the inquiries section. There was a hard pull from a leasing agency I didn't recognize. Then I went to the public records section. Usually, this section is empty. It wasn't. Power of attorney. Filing date. 16 months ago. Grantor. Eleanor M. Russell. Agent. Kent. Russell. I stopped breathing. I had never signed a power of attorney. Never. I clicked on the document preview. It was a blurry scan, but I could see the signature. It was the same loop, the same dated flourish, and there was a notary stamp. Calvin Dorr, Notary Public, commission expires, 2027. I stared at the screen. My father had a power of attorney. That was how they did it. That was how they opened the accounts, signed the contracts, authorized the transfers. They had used a forged legal instrument to impersonate me. They hadn't just set me up. They had been planning this for a year and a half. They had been stealing from the renewal fund using my name, knowing that if the scheme ever collapsed, I would be the firewall. They were willing to send me to prison to save Dylan. They were willing to brand me a felon for the rest of my life so their precious son could keep his job at the dealership. 2 years in prison won't kill you. Rage, hot and purifying, began to replace the fear. I looked at the clock on the stove. It was 2:15 in the morning. I looked at the folder they had left on the table. No, they had taken the folder. But I remembered the look of it. I remembered the arrogance of it. They thought I would sign. They thought I was still the little girl who was afraid of disappointing them. They thought that because they were my parents, their word was law. They were right about one thing. Paperwork was powerful. Paperwork could send you to prison. Paperwork could ruin your life. But paperwork worked both ways. If they wanted to use documents to bury me, I would use documents to dig myself out. But my documents would be real. My documents would be bulletproof. I opened a new tab on the iPad. I typed in the search bar, Mobile Notary, Briar Glen 24 hours. A list popped up. I skipped the big chains. I looked for an independent, someone who looked meticulous. I found a listing for a woman named Lena Park, certified signing agent, 24/7 service, detailed records. I clicked on her number. It was late, but her ad said 24 hours. I opened a blank document app on the iPad. I began to type, Affidavit of Identity Theft and Coercion. I, Eleanor Russell, being of sound mind, do hereby declare. My fingers flew across the glass screen. I wrote down everything. The visit from the detectives, the visit from my parents, the quote about prison not killing me, the existence of the power of attorney I never signed, the discrepancy in the dates. I wrote until my eyes blurred. When I was done, I had 3 pages of dense, factual narrative. I looked at the phone number for Lena Park again. I would call her at 6 in the morning. I would have her come here. I would sign this affidavit in front of her. I would have her verify my ID. I would have her log it in her journal with a timestamp. Then I would draft a revocation of the power of attorney. I would notarize that too. Then I would freeze my credit. My parents wanted a paper trail? I would give them a paper trail. I would create a fortress of sworn statements, timestamps, and third-party witnesses that they could not gaslight their way out of. I was not going to be their sacrifice. I looked at the cold lasagna one last time. I stood up, picked up the plate, and walked to the trash can. I scraped the food into the bin. Then I went back to the table and waited for the sun to come up. The sun rose at 6:12. The sky was a bruised purple, slowly turning to gray. At 6:15, I dialed the number for Lena Park. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was crisp, awake. Parkmobile Notary. This is Lena. Hi, I said. My voice was raspy from lack of use. My name is Ellie Russell. I have an emergency situation regarding identity theft and a fraudulent power of attorney. I need to execute several sworn affidavits and revocations immediately. I need a witness who is meticulous. There was a pause on the line. I heard the sound of a pen clicking. I can be there in 45 minutes, Lena said. Do you have valid government ID? I have my passport. I said, the police took my driver's license, but I have my passport. That works, she said. Text me the address. I hung up. I went to the bathroom and brushed my teeth. I brushed my hair. I put on a blazer. I was not the operations coordinator for Hawthorne Medical Supply anymore. That life was gone. The silence was broken. I was now the plaintiff in the case of Ellie Russell versus the world, and I was going to win. I sat by the window and watched the street. 40 minutes later, a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman got out, carrying a heavy briefcase. She looked serious. She looked professional. She looked like the first domino. I went downstairs to let her in. As I walked down the hallway, I passed the mirror in the foyer. I looked at myself. I looked terrified. Yes, but I also looked dangerous. My father was wrong. 2 years in prison might not kill me, but what I was about to do to them? It was going to hurt. I opened the door. Lena Park stood there. "Good morning. Ms. Russell? Good morning." I said, "Thank you for coming. We have a lot of work to do." She stepped inside. I closed the door and locked it. The war had begun. We sat at my kitchen table. Lena Park was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with sharp glasses and hair pulled back in a severe bun. She did not ask why I looked like I hadn't slept. She did not ask why there was a chair wedged under the door handle earlier. She just set up her supplies: a heavy-bound journal, an ink pad, a stamper, and a terrifyingly nice pen. "Okay," she said. "Walk me through what we are notarizing today." I slid the iPad over to her. "I need to handwrite this statement onto paper." I said, "I want to write it out in my own hand. It is an affidavit detailing the events of the last 12 hours and stating clearly that I did not sign the power of attorney filed in my name 16 months ago." Lena nodded. "Standard affidavit of fact. We can do that. What else?" "I need to draft a formal revocation of power of attorney." I said, "I looked up the template online. I want to make it effective immediately upon signature." "Smart," Lena said. She pulled a blank form from her briefcase. "I carry generic revocation forms. We can use this." I took the form. My hands were steady now. The adrenaline had leveled out into a cold. Hard focus. I began to write. I, Eleanor Russell, hereby revoke, cancel, and annul any and all powers of attorney previously executed by me, specifically including but not limited to the document filed on. I looked at the screenshot on my iPad. August 12th of last year, appointing Kent Russell as agent. I wrote it down. Then I wrote the affidavit. I wrote about the visit. I wrote the quote, "2 years in prison won't kill you." I wanted that in the sworn record. When I was done, my hand cramped. Lena took the documents. She checked my passport. She scrutinized my face, then the photo. She opened her journal. "Sign here," she said, pointing to a line in her book. I signed. It was my real signature, the one I used every day. Not the loop, not the flourish. She watched me sign. Then she signed her name next to mine. She took the stamp. Thump, thump. The sound was loud in the quiet apartment. It sounded like a gavel. "Okay," Lena said. "You are notarized. These are legal instruments now." She handed me the papers. The embossed seal raised the paper slightly. It felt textured. It felt real. "What do I do with these?" I asked. Lena looked at me. "If what you wrote in that affidavit is true," she said, her voice dropping its professional detachment for just a second, "you need to get these to the county clerk immediately to record the revocation. And then you need to get a lawyer, a criminal defense lawyer, not a family lawyer." I nodded. I paid her. She gave me a receipt. As she was packing up, she paused. "You know," she said, "I keep a strict log. If anyone ever questions the timing of this, if anyone claims you signed this later, or under duress, I testify. My journal is admissible evidence. Thank you." I said, "That is exactly what I needed to hear." She left. I held the papers in my hand. It was 8 in the morning. My parents would be waking up soon. They would be drinking coffee, talking about how they were going to handle me. They would be expecting me to call, crying, asking for the plea deal folder. Instead, I was going to the county clerk's office. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed the papers. I walked out the door. The sun was fully up now. The light was harsh, revealing the grime on the city streets, the cracks in the sidewalk. It was ugly, but it was real. I started walking toward downtown. I had a long way to go, and I had a lot of paper to file. The silence was over. It was time to make some noise. The morning sun was trying to push through the gray cloud cover over Briar Glen, casting a flat, diffuse light across my kitchen table. I sat there with my hands clasped, watching the street below, waiting for a silver sedan. I had made the call to Lena Park, the mobile notary. At 6:15 in the morning, I had kept my voice steady, framing the request as an urgent personal matter involving identity theft protection. I told her I needed a neutral witness and a clean timeline. I did not tell her that the people I was protecting myself against were the people who had taught me how to tie my shoes. When Lena arrived, she was exactly what I needed: professional, efficient, and uninterested in small talk. She set her bag on the table, and the sound of the zipper opening seemed incredibly loud in the silence of my apartment. "I have the documents prepared," I said. I pushed 3 stacks of paper toward her. Lena adjusted her glasses and pulled out her journal. "Let us go through them one by one. I need to verify that you understand what you are signing and that you are doing so of your own free will." I looked at the first document. It was a sworn statement of facts. I had spent 2 hours drafting it on my iPad before printing it out on my dusty home printer. It detailed the visit from the detectives, the specific questions they asked, and then, in excruciating detail, the visit from my parents. I had transcribed their dialogue as best as I could remember it, including the timestamp of when they arrived and when they left. I made sure to include the sentence that had been looping in my mind like a broken record. 2 years in prison won't kill you. I understand. I said, I am signing this to create a contemporaneous record of coercion and my denial of any involvement in the North Pine consulting scheme. Lena nodded and watched me sign. She stamped the page. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper was heavy and final. Thump. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut. But this time, I was the one holding the key. Next, I said, this was the revocation of power of attorney. I had found a template online and customized it to be as broad and aggressive as possible. It revoked any and all powers of attorney, known or unknown, past or present. I specifically listed the date my father had filed the fraudulent document. Even though I had never signed the original, I am revoking an authority I never granted. I told Lena, but I need the revocation to be on the record so they cannot use the old one again. Lena raised an eyebrow but did not comment. She just verified my ID again, watched me sign, and applied the seal. The third document was a request to freeze identity records. This was a formal letter addressed to the major credit bureaus and the county clerk, requesting a freeze on any changes to my vital records without in-person verification. It was a fail-safe. If my parents tried to change my address or open a new line of credit to pay off the old one, this would stop them. We finished in 20 minutes. Lena handed me the logbook to sign. "You are thorough," she said as she capped her pen. "Most people just call the bank. The bank cannot stop my father." I said, "I need paper." Lena looked at me, and for a second, her professional mask slipped. She looked at the bruises of fatigue under my eyes. "Paper is good," she said, "but if this is as messy as it looks, get a lawyer who knows how to use it." I thanked her and paid her in cash. When she left, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was not relief, exactly. It was the feeling of weight. I was holding 3 ounces of paper that proved I existed apart from the Russell family. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the office of Graham Voss. Graham was not a family friend. He was not someone my father played golf with. He was a criminal defense attorney I had found by searching for financial fraud defense and aggressive in the next county over. His office smelled of old books and stale coffee, and his desk was a chaotic landscape of manila folders. He read my sworn statement in silence. He read the revocation. He looked at the copies of the invoices I had managed to download from my work email before the detectives took my laptop. When he finally looked up, his eyes were sharp. He was a man in his 50s, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and then left out in the rain. "You did the right thing with the notary," he said. His voice was gravelly, "but you are in a very dangerous position." "Ellie, I know." I said, "That is why I am here. My parents, they want me to confess. They have a plan for me to take a plea." Graham leaned forward. "Listen to me very carefully. Confessing to keep the peace is how innocent people get trapped. I have seen it 100 times. Families, especially tight-knit ones, they convince the weakest member, or the kindest member, to fall on the sword. They promise it will be a slap on the wrist. They promise they will make it right later." He tapped the desk with his index finger. "But in financial crimes, the system does not care about your family dynamics. The system cares about the paper trail, and right now, the paper trail points to you. If you admit to this, even a little bit, you solidify that trail, you validate their forgery, you give the prosecutor exactly what they want, a closed case with a bow on top. I am not going to confess, I said. I want to fight this. Good, Graham said, but you need to be smart. You cannot just scream that you are innocent. We need to prove how they did it. We need to find the cracks in their story. He handed the papers back to me. Go back to them, he said. I blinked. What? Go back to your parents. Do not tell them you hired me. Do not tell them about the notary. Put on a calm mask. Tell them you are reconsidering their offer. Tell them you are scared and you just want to understand the details before you sign anything. He wants me to spy on them. I realized, you want me to get them to talk. I said, I want you to get them to reveal what they know. Graham corrected. If they think you are folding, they will get sloppy. They will try to reassure you, and in their reassurance, they might give us the thread we need to pull to unravel this whole thing. But you have to be convincing. Can you do that? I thought about the years I had spent pretending everything was fine. I thought about the holidays where I smiled while my father criticized my career choices and my mother made backhanded compliments about my weight. I had been acting my whole life. I can do it, I said. My parents lived in a sprawling colonial on the wealthy side of Briar Glen. It was the kind of house that looked perfect from the street. Manicured lawn, fresh paint, flowers in the window boxes, but inside, the air always felt thin, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I parked my car in the driveway and took a minute to compose myself. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. I made my expression soft, pliable. I let my shoulders slump. I needed to look like the defeated daughter they expected. I walked up the path and unlocked the front door with my key. Mom? Dad? I called out. They were in the kitchen. My mother was chopping vegetables with a frantic energy. My father was sitting at the island, looking at a spreadsheet on his tablet. When they saw me, the tension in the room broke instantly. Ellie, my mother said. She dropped the knife and rushed over to hug me. Oh, thank God. We were so worried. You didn't answer your phone all morning. I just needed to think, I said, letting her squeeze me. I kept my arms limp at my sides. My father turned on his stool. He looked relieved, but there was a wariness in his eyes. Did you sign the papers? I sat down at the island, 3 stools away from him. Not yet, I said softly. I want to. I really do. I am scared. Dad, it is a lot to take in. My father softened. Of course you are scared. It is a big step, but it is the only way to protect the family. I need to understand. I said, I looked down at my hands. If I do this, if I take the blame, how do we know it will work? How do we know the police won't keep digging? My father chuckled. A dry, dismissive sound. The police are overworked bureaucrats. Ellie, they don't want to dig. They want a confession. Once you give them that, they close the file. But the money? I said, $85,000. Where did it go? If I'm going to say I took it, I need to know what I supposedly did with it. My parents exchanged a look. It was a micro-expression, a flash of communication that happened so fast I almost missed it. It went into the trust. My mother said quickly, The trust? I asked. The Russell Heritage Trust, my father said. He sat up straighter, adopting a tone of importance. It is something we set up a few years ago, for the future. For you and Dylan, the business has been volatile. We wanted to secure the family's assets. I stared at him. I had never heard of the Russell Heritage Trust. You stole money from a charity to put it into a trust fund? I asked, keeping my voice innocent. We did not steal it. My father snapped, then lowered his voice. We borrowed it. It was a leverage play. We were going to pay it back before anyone noticed. But the grant audit came early. He leaned in. Listen, Ellie, you are a beneficiary of that trust. That money is for your future, too. You have to do your part to keep it safe. If the authorities seize the trust, we lose everything. The house, the business, Your inheritance? I felt a cold chill spread through my chest. There was no trust, or if there was, it was just another shell. They were using a fictional inheritance to manipulate me. They were bribing me with my own imaginary money. I see. I said, so, I am protecting my own future. Exactly. My mother said. She reached out and patted my hand. We are doing this for you. Honey, I pulled my hand away slowly, pretending to scratch my nose. And the paperwork? I asked. The invoices? The bank account? How did you make it look so real? My father waved his hand. That was easy. Just some scanning and editing. We had all your old info in the file cabinet. My mother chimed in. And you know, Dylan helped a little, with the formatting. He is so good with computers. She clapped a hand over her mouth, realizing she had said too much. My father shot her a withering look. Dylan helped? I asked. He just tidied up the PDFs. My father said quickly, It is not important. The point is, the setup is bulletproof. As long as you stick to the script. I nodded slowly. I stood up. Okay, I said. I believe you. You will sign? My father asked. I will. I lied. I just need one more night, to say goodbye to my apartment, to get my head straight. I will go to the DA tomorrow morning. My father looked at me for a long second. He was assessing me, looking for cracks. But I had been hiding my true self from him for 33 years. I was good at this. Okay, he said. Tomorrow morning, we will drive you. No, I said. I need to do it myself. I need to walk in there on my own 2 feet. It will look better. More remorseful. Smart girl. My father said. He smiled. I was proud of him for a second. He thought he had won. I walked out of the house. My back was burning, but I did not turn around. I had what I needed. They had admitted Dylan was involved. They had admitted to the trust, and they had admitted they used my old files. When I got back to my apartment, I went straight to my closet. I dug out a box of old tax returns and paperwork I had taken with me when I moved out. If they used my old files, there had to be a trace. I booted up my old laptop, not the one the police took, but an ancient brick of a machine from college that I kept for emergencies. I plugged it into the Ethernet cable. I logged into the old email account, the one the detectives had mentioned. Ellie, Russell.88. I hadn't checked it in years, but I knew the password. Star Wars. 1977. The inbox was full of thousands of unread spam emails, Viagra offers, fake inheritances, newsletters I never signed up for. I went to the search bar. I typed North Pine. Nothing. I typed invoice. Hundreds of results, but mostly from legitimate companies. Then I typed Russell, and there it was. One email, dated 18 months ago. Subject, vendor onboarding. Docs needed from admin.northpine-consulting.com to Ellie, Russell.88. Gmail.com. I clicked it. My heart was hammering. The email was blank, except for an attachment. ID_scan_ER PDF. I opened the attachment. It was a scan of my driver's license, but it was my old license, the one that expired 2 years ago. I stared at the image on the screen. It wasn't a clean digital scan. It was a photograph of the license sitting on a surface. I zoomed in. The license was resting on a table with a distinctive pattern, a yellow floral tablecloth with a small cigarette burn near the edge. I gasped. That was my mother's kitchen table, the one she had replaced last year because of that exact burn mark, a burn mark my father had made with a cigar during a poker game. I took a screenshot. I took a photo of the screen with my phone. This proved the identity document used to verify the North Pine account was photographed in my parents' house. It linked the fraud directly to their kitchen. I kept digging. I looked at the date of the email. August 12th. August 12th. Why did that date feel familiar? I opened my work calendar on my phone. Scrolling back 18 months. August 12th. Summit Harbor, PA. Regional Supply Chain Conference. I froze. I remembered that trip. I remembered it vividly because it was the worst trip of my life. I had been up for a promotion, and I was terrified of public speaking. I had a panic attack in the hotel bathroom right before the keynote mixer. I had been sitting on the cold tile floor, hyperventilating, unable to feel my fingers. I had called Tessa. Tessa Wynn was my best friend since college. She was the only person who knew how crazy my family truly was. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the first ring. "Ellie? I heard about the police." "Are you okay?" "I am not okay," I said, "but I am fighting." "Tessa, I need you to remember something. Do you remember the conference in Summit Harbor? The one where I had the panic attack?" "Oh, God. Yes," she said. "You called me crying. You thought you were having a heart attack. I stayed on the phone with you for an hour until you calmed down." "What date was that?" I asked. "Hold on. Let me check my calendar." I heard her typing. "Here it is, August 12th. We talked from 6 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. I looked at the email timestamp, 6:45 p.m. At the exact moment the Ellie Russell account was emailing the fraudulent driver's license scan to open the vendor account. The real Ellie Russell was on the phone with her best friend, 300 miles away in Pennsylvania. "Tessa," I said, my voice shaking. "Do you have records? Phone logs?" "I have everything. Ellie, you know me. I never delete anything. I have the call log. And, wait," she paused. "Didn't I order you an Uber Eats that night? Because you were too scared to leave the room?" "Yes," I shouted. "Yes, you did. You sent me soup. I am looking at the receipt right now." Tessa said, "Delivered to the Marriott Summit Harbor, room 412. Address to Ellie Russell, August 12th, 7:30 p.m. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "That is my alibi," I said. "That proves I was not in Briar Glen opening a bank account. That proves I was not sending fake vendor emails. I will send you screenshots right now." Tessa said, "I will export the whole chat history." "Ellie, did they really do this to you?" "They did." I said, "and they want me to go to prison for it. I will burn them down." Tessa said fiercely, "Just tell me what you need. Send me everything." I said, "Every receipt, every timestamp." I hung up. I watched the notifications roll in. Screenshots, PDFs, a rideshare history showing I took a car from the Philly airport to the hotel 2 days prior. I had them. I had the lever. Then my phone buzzed again. A text message. I looked at the screen. It was Dylan. I felt a spike of adrenaline. My brother never texted me. He usually communicated through our mother. I opened the message. "Dylan, please just do what Mom says. I'll pay you back. I promise." I stared at the words. "I'll pay you back." He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about the prison sentence. He was talking about my life. He was asking me to loan him 2 years of my freedom, as if it was $20 for a pizza. The phrasing chilled me to the bone. It was so transactional, so devoid of empathy. He knew exactly what was happening. He wasn't a fragile victim. He was a participant. He was bargaining with my existence to save his own comfort. I did not reply. I didn't type a furious response. I didn't call him to scream. I took a screenshot. Then I went to my bookshelf. I pulled out a fresh 3-ring binder. I had bought it months ago for a recipe project I never started. It was white, clean, pristine. I cleared the kitchen table. I laid out the documents, the notarized affidavit, the revocation of power of attorney, the identity freeze request, the screenshot of the driver's license on my mother's table, the Summit Harbor hotel receipt, the Uber Eats receipt from Tessa, the call logs, the text from Dylan. I punched holes in the pages. The sound of the hole punch was rhythmic, steady. Crunch, crunch. I began to assemble the timeline. Page 1, the lie. Page 2, the truth. I labeled the binder spine with a black Sharpie. I wrote one word: evidence. I was not just building a defense anymore. I was building a trap. And the next time my parents tried to push me, I was going to let the steel jaws snap shut. Graham Voss placed a heavy cardboard box on his desk. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light coming through the window, highlighting the chaotic state of his office. He looked at me with the weary expression of a man who had spent 30 years watching people lie to themselves. but his eyes were sharp. "We received preliminary discovery," he said. I sat forward in the leather chair, my hands gripping the armrests. I felt a mixture of nausea and anticipation. For days, I had been living in a vacuum of anxiety, waiting to see exactly what kind of monster my parents had built in my name. "Show me," I said. Graham opened the box and pulled out 3 thick binders. He laid them out side by side. "The prosecution has built a 3-legged stool," he said, "and I have to admit, it is a sturdy one. If we do not kick out at least 2 of these legs, you are going to prison." He tapped the first binder. "Leg 1 is the signature," he said. "We have 17 vendor contracts, 24 change orders, and 12 monthly invoices. Every single one of them bears a signature that looks remarkably like yours." He flipped the binder open. I leaned in. There it was. Ellie Russell. The loop on the L was too wide. The slant was slightly off. But to a layman, to a jury, it looked identical to the signature on my driver's license. "Leg 2, Graham continued, tapping the second binder, "is the money. The trail is clean. Ellie, money leaves the renewal fund, goes to North Pine Consulting, and then transfers immediately to an account at First National, an account with your name, your social security number, and your mother's maiden name as the security question." I felt the blood pound in my ears. They used my mother's maiden name. Of course they did. It was the answer to every security question I had ever set up. Because they were the ones who helped me set up my first account when I was 16. "And leg 3, Graham said, tapping the final binder. "The communications. This is the part that worries me the most." He slid a stack of printed emails across the desk toward me. I picked them up. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be still. These were emails sent from Ellie.Russell.88gmail.com to the finance department at the renewal fund. I read the top one. "Hey Harper, just checking on that invoice for the strategic outreach. My brother is breathing down my neck about the vendor payment. Can we expedite? Thanks. L." I stared at the paper. "My brother. They mentioned Dylan," I whispered. Graham nodded. "But look at the phrasing. Do you talk like that? Breathing down my neck? Expedite?" I shook my head. "I never use the word expedite. I say speed up or rush. And I never sign emails L. I sign them Ellie or best." "Ellie." Graham leaned back. "You know that. I know that. But the prosecutor sees a consistent pattern of communication from an account linked to you. Approving fraud. This creates a narrative of intent. They are painting you as the ringleader who was pushing for the money." I dropped the paper back onto the desk. "It is not me," I said. "I was not there." Graham looked at me seriously. "We need to prove that. We have the Summit Harbor receipt, and that is a great start. But we need more. We need to find the person who was actually on the other end of these emails and phone calls. Because according to the witness list, the finance manager at the renewal fund had several phone conversations with you." "Phone conversations?" I asked. "Yes," Graham said. "The witness statement says she spoke to Ellie Russell multiple times to clarify billing codes." I stood up. "I need to talk to her." Graham frowned. "Ellie, you cannot interfere with a witness. That is a one-way ticket to a revocation of your bail conditions. I am not going to interfere." I said, "I am going to the renewal fund to clear up a billing error. I am going to introduce myself. If she spoke to the real Ellie Russell on the phone, she should recognize my voice, right? And if she spoke to someone else?" Graham hesitated. Then a slow, shark-like smile spread across his face. "If she spoke to someone else," he said, "then hearing your actual voice might just be the shock we need to shake her testimony. But be careful. Do not discuss the case details. Just let her hear you." The Briar Glen Renewal Fund was located in a converted warehouse on the edge of town, sandwiched between a tire shop and a bakery. The office was an open-plan space cluttered with boxes of donated school supplies and posters for charity fun runs. I walked in at 10 in the morning. The air smelled of toner and stale donuts. A woman was sitting at a desk in the back, buried behind a wall of manila folders. She looked exhausted. Her hair was frizzy, and she was aggressively typing on a calculator. "Excuse me?" I said. She looked up, startled. She was about 40, with glasses sliding down her nose. "Can I help you?" "I am looking for Harper Klein." I said, "I am Harper," she said, adjusting her glasses. I took a breath. "Hi, my name is Ellie Russell." The reaction was immediate. Harper froze. Her hands stopped moving over the calculator. She stared at me with wide, fearful eyes. "You?" she whispered. "You have a lot of nerve coming here." I kept my voice calm, pleasant. "I'm sorry to disturb you. Harper, I know this is a difficult time, but there seems to be a significant confusion regarding the accounts, and I wanted to introduce myself in person." She stood up, pushing her chair back. It scraped loudly against the concrete floor. "Confusion? You stole $85,000 from a children's program. I spoke to the police. I told them everything. I know." I said. I stepped a little closer, keeping my hands visible. I wanted her to see me. I wanted her to hear the timbre of my voice. "You told them you spoke to me on the phone." "I did," Harper said, her voice rising. "Multiple times. You called me to harass me about the wire transfers." I listened to her voice. It was high, stressed. "Harper," I said gently, "listen to me. Listen to the sound of my voice. Have we ever spoken before?" Harper blinked. She looked at me. Really looked at me. She cocked her head to the side. "You?" she started, then stopped. "You sound different." "Different how?" "On the phone," she said slowly. "You sounded deeper, raspier, like a smoker, and you talked fast. Really fast." "I do not smoke," I said, "and I am known for talking slowly when I'm at work." Harper frowned. She rubbed her temple. "But it had to be you. You knew things." "What things?" I asked. Harper hesitated, looking around the empty office. "You asked about things only you would know. You asked if the check could be cut early because you needed to pay for your dog's surgery. You said Buster had a tumor." I felt a cold shiver go down my spine. "Buster," I repeated. "Yeah, your dog. Buster." I looked Harper in the eye. "Harper, Buster was my childhood dog. He died when I was 12 years old. I have not owned a dog since—" Harper's mouth opened slightly, but the woman on the phone, she was crying. She said she was desperate. She said her brother Dylan was going to kill her if the money did not come through because he fronted the vet bills. My stomach twisted. Dylan. They used Dylan's name to add pressure. But it was the detail about the dog that nailed it. Only family knew about Buster. Only family knew how much I had loved that dog. It was my mother. I realized my mother had a raspier voice. My mother smoked in secret when she was stressed. And my mother knew exactly which emotional buttons to push to make a stranger feel sympathy. "Harper," I said softly, "I did not make those calls." Harper stared at me. Her defensive posture began to crumble. She looked from my face to the door, then back to me. "But the emails," she said weakly, "the paperwork, the notary stamp." "What about the notary stamp?" I asked. Harper walked over to a filing cabinet. She pulled out a thick file. "This is the vendor packet," she said. "The police have the original, but I kept a copy." She flipped to the back page. I looked at the document. It was the vendor authorization form. It authorized the renewal fund to wire money directly to the North Pine Consulting account. There was a signature, Ellie Russell, and next to it, a notary stamp, Calvin Dorr, Notary Public, State of New York, County of Westchester. My eyes scanned the stamp. Then I looked at the date handwritten next to it, October 14th. I stared at the date, my mind scrambling for where I'd been. Where was I on October 14th? I closed my eyes, searching my memory. October. The leaves were changing. Work was busy. Then it hit me. October 14th was a Tuesday. I was at the dentist in the morning for a root canal. I had been under sedation for 2 hours. And then I spent the rest of the day on my couch with an ice pack. Watching reality television, I did not sign any documents on October 14th. I could barely open my mouth on October 14th. But there was something else. I looked closely at the stamp again. County of Westchester. Briar Glen is in Rockland County. My parents live in Rockland County. Why was the notary from Westchester? And then I saw the location of the notarization written in the log section at the bottom of the page. White Plains, New York. White Plains is in Westchester. If I was sedated on my couch in Briar Glen, I could not have been in White Plains signing a vendor form. Thank you. Harper, I said, you have been very helpful. I turned to leave. Wait, Harper said. She looked scared now. If it wasn't you, then who have I been talking to for a year? I looked back at her. You have been talking to a ghost. Harper, but do not worry. We are going to bust them. I sat in my car in the Renewal Fund parking lot and dialed Lena Park's number. She answered on the first ring. Park Mobile Notary, Lena. It is Ellie Russell. I said, I have a hypothetical question about notary law. Go ahead, she said. If a document is notarized in White Plains on a specific date, does the signer have to be physically present in White Plains on that date? Absolutely. Lena said, that is the golden rule. Appearance is mandatory. If the notary stamps it, they are certifying that the person stood in front of them, presented ID, and signed the document in their presence. If the person was not there, it is fraud. It is a Class E felony for the notary. And what if the notary claims they just made a mistake on the date? Notaries keep a journal, Lena said, or they should. If they are following the law, they log the date, time, location, type of ID presented, and obtain a thumbprint or signature in their book. If the journal entry says you were there, and you can prove you were at the dentist, then the notary is lying. I finished. Exactly, Lena said. Why? What did you find? I found a stamp. I said, Calvin Dorr. Do you know him? There was a long silence on the other end. Calvin Dorr, Lena said, her voice dropping an octave. Yeah, I know the name. He is flexible. He does a lot of work for the car dealerships in the area. High volume, fast turnaround, not exactly known for his diligence. Car dealerships. I thought, like the one where my brother Dylan works. Lena, I said, I need a favor. I need a certified copy of the journal entry from when you came to my apartment the other day. I need proof that I hired you to document my coercion before any of this other stuff came to light. I can do that, Lena said. I will scan it and email it to you. Then drop the hard copy in the mail. That log entry is your anchor. Ellie, it proves your state of mind on that morning. It proves you were actively disputing the fraud before they could corner you. Thank you, I said. I hung up. I felt a surge of energy. I had a name, Calvin Dorr, the flexible notary, the man who stamped the lies into truth. I drove home, my mind racing with plans. I needed to tell Graham about the dentist appointment. I needed to get the dental records to prove I was incapacitated on October 14th. But when I turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. There was a black SUV parked illegally in front of my apartment building. I recognized the license plate. Russ Pham. My parents were here. I parked 3 cars down and approached cautiously. I could hear them before I saw them. They were in the hallway outside my apartment door on the 2nd floor. The building had thin walls and an echoing stairwell. Ellie! My mother was wailing. Ellie, please open the door. We just want to make sure you are safe. I walked into the lobby and looked up the stairwell. My mother was pounding on my door. My father was standing behind her, looking grim. Mrs. Higgins from 2B opened her door. Is everything all right? I heard her ask. My mother spun around, tears streaming down her face. Oh, I am so sorry to disturb you. It is my daughter. She is having a very hard time. She has been confused lately, mentally unstable. We are just trying to get her to come home so we can get her some help. I froze. They were playing the insanity card. They were planting the seed that I was crazy, that the fraud was a result of a mental breakdown, and that my denial was just a symptom of my illness. She stopped taking her medication, my father added, his voice deep and concerned. We are worried she might hurt herself. Rage, hot and white, flooded my vision. I didn't take medication. I had never been unstable in my life. I was the one who balanced the checkbooks. I was the one who remembered birthdays. I started to march up the stairs to confront them, to scream that they were liars. Then I stopped. If I went up there and screamed, I would look exactly like what they were describing. Hysterical, unstable. They were baiting me. They wanted a public scene. They wanted witnesses to see Ellie Russell losing her mind. I stepped back into the shadow of the lobby. I pulled out my phone and started recording video. I caught my mother's performance. I caught my father's lie about the medication. I recorded for 2 minutes. Then I slipped out the front door and walked around the block. I sat on a bench in the park and called Graham. "They are at my apartment," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed anger. "They are telling my neighbors I am off my meds. They are trying to destroy my credibility before we even get to court." Graham sighed. "Disengage. Ellie, do not go home until they leave. Stay at a hotel if you have to. If you confront them, you give them ammo. But I cannot just let them write the story." I said, "They are winning the narrative war. Everyone in that building thinks I'm crazy now." "Let them think it," Graham said. "We will prove them wrong in court with facts." I hung up. I looked at the recording on my phone. Graham was right about the legal strategy, but he was wrong about the human one. If I just hid, they would keep escalating. They would keep tightening the noose until I suffocated. I needed to give them what they wanted, or rather, what they thought they wanted. They wanted a confession. They wanted a signature. I looked at the video again. My mother was desperate. My father was arrogant. They were so sure of their control over me. I formulated a plan. It was dangerous. Graham would hate it. But it was the only way to get the evidence I needed to link them to Calvin Dorr. I waited an hour until I saw their SUV drive away. Then I went back to my apartment. I ignored the pitying looks from Mrs. Higgins as I walked up the stairs. I went inside and waited for the sun to go down. Then, at 7 p.m., I called my mother. I made sure my voice sounded tired, broken. "Mom?" I whispered. "Ellie? Oh my God, where have you been? We were at your place. We were so worried." "I was hiding." I said, "I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Honey? Scared of prison?" I said. I let a sob escape. It wasn't hard to fake. I was terrified. "I do not want to go to prison." "Mom, you won't have to go for long," she said, her voice instantly shifting from panic to soothing operator. "Just the 2 years, maybe less. We told you. We will take care of everything." I took a deep breath. "Okay, I am ready. I cannot fight this anymore. It is too hard." "Oh, Ellie, that is the right decision," she said. I could hear the relief washing over her. I could hear her snapping her fingers at my father in the background. "But," I said, adding a tremble to my voice, "I want to do it right. I do not want to mess it up. I want to sign the confession. But I want it to be official. So the judge sees I am serious. We have the papers," she said. "We can come over right now." "No." I said, "Not just papers. I want a notary. I want a witness. If I'm going to confess, I want it to be legal. I do not want the police to say I was forced." My mother paused. "A notary?" "Yes." I said, "A mobile notary. I can call one?" "No," she interrupted quickly. "No. Do not call a stranger. We know someone, a family friend. He has helped us with business papers before. He is very discreet." I held my breath. "Say the name. His name is Calvin," she said. "He is a lovely man. We can bring him with us." "Calvin," I repeated. "Calvin Dorr?" "Yes, that is him. How did you know?" I think I saw his name on some of Dad's work papers once." I improvised. "Okay," I said. "Bring Calvin. Bring the papers. Come tomorrow morning at 9. "We will be there," she said. "Sleep well. Honey, everything is going to be fine." I hung up. "Got you." She had insisted on Calvin. She had walked right into the trap. I immediately dialed Lena Park. "Lena," I said, "I need to hire you for a job tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. "I thought you were done with documents," she asked. "I am." I said, "I do not need you to notarize a signature. I need you to notarize a meeting." "What do you mean?" "I am inviting my parents and their crooked notary to my apartment to present me with a false confession." I said, "I need you to arrive 5 minutes after they do. I need you to walk in. Identify yourself as a notary public and document exactly who is in the room and what documents are on the table." Lena was silent for a moment. "You want me to witness a crime?" "I want you to witness the coercion." I said, "I want a clean chain of custody. I want you to log that Calvin Dorr is present and acting as a notary. I want to see if he follows the rules when another notary is watching him." "That is aggressive," Lena said. "Will you do it?" I heard her check her schedule. "I will be there," she said. "But Ellie, if this goes sideways, I am calling the police. If this goes right," I said, "we won't need to call them. They will come to us." The next morning, I dressed carefully. I wore a soft gray sweater and jeans. I looked small. I looked harmless. I set up my phone in the corner of the living room, hidden behind a stack of books. Recording audio. I could not risk video, but audio would be enough. At 9 sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it. My parents stood there. My mother was holding a casserole dish again. This time, tuna noodle. My father was holding the blue folder, and behind them stood a short, balding man in a rumpled suit. He was clutching a leather bag. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the hallway. "This is Calvin," my father said, ushering the man inside. "Hello, Calvin," I said. He mumbled a greeting. He didn't ask for my ID. He didn't ask if I was signing of my own free will. He just walked to the table and started pulling out his stamp. We sat down. The atmosphere was thick with false cheer. "Here it is, Ellie," my mother said, opening the folder. "Just sign at the bottom. Calvin will stamp it. And then we can go to the DEA together." I looked at the paper. Statement of allocation. I picked up a pen. My hand hovered over the paper. "So, this says I did everything," I said. "It says I opened the account. It says I sent the emails." Yes, my father said impatiently. "It is just a formality. Sign it." Calvin uncapped his stamp. He was holding it ready, like a weapon. I looked at Calvin. "Do you need to see my driver's license?" I asked. He blinked, sweat beading on his upper lip. He looked at my father. "Oh, I know who you are," Calvin said quickly. "Kent has vouched for you." "It's fine. It is fine," I repeated. "You don't need to verify my identity. We are all family here," my father said. "Just sign the damn paper." "Ellie," I looked at the clock. 9:05. There was a knock at the door. My parents jumped. My father looked at the door, then at me. "Who is that?" I stood up. "I don't know." I said, "Let me check." I walked to the door and opened it. Lena Park stood there. She was wearing a sharp blazer and holding her official notary logbook prominently in her hand. She looked like a federal agent compared to Calvin's used car salesman vibe. "Good morning, Ms. Russell," she said, her voice projecting clearly into the apartment. "I am here for our scheduled appointment regarding your affidavit of presence." I stepped back to let her in. My father stood up. "Who the hell is this?" "This is Lena Park," I said. "She is a notary public." Lena walked into the living room. She took in the scene instantly, the papers on the table, the parents, and Calvin. She looked at Calvin. She looked at his stamp hovering over the document. "Good morning," she said to him. "I am Lena Park. I see you are conducting a notarization." Calvin turned pale. He lowered his stamp. My father stepped between them. "We don't need another notary. We have one. Get out." "I am afraid I cannot do that," Lena said calmly. She opened her logbook. "Ms. Russell has hired me to document the attendees of this meeting." She pulled out a pen. She looked at Calvin. "Name?" she asked him. "Calvin Dorr," he whispered. "Commission number?" she asked. He recited it, his voice shaking. Lena wrote it down. She looked at the document on the table. She looked at my father. "And are you verifying the signer's identity through personal knowledge or credible witness?" she asked Calvin. Calvin looked at my father. He looked at the door. He looked like he wanted to vanish. I haven't performed the act yet," Calvin stammered. "I was just preparing." I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "Actually, Calvin," I said, "I have a question. Do you remember notarizing a vendor authorization form for me on October 14th in White Plains? The room went dead silent. My mother gasped. My father's face turned a dangerous shade of red. Calvin dropped his stamp. It clattered onto the table. I don't recall. He said, "Really?" I asked. "Because I was at the dentist that day. I have the records. So I'm wondering whose signature you stamped." Calvin grabbed his bag. He shoveled his stamp inside. "I have to go," he said. "I can't be here. I have another appointment. Calvin." "Wait," my father shouted. But Calvin was already moving. He practically ran to the door. Lena watched him go. She wrote something in her book. Notary. Calvin Dorr departed 9:08 a.m., refused to complete notarization upon questioning. She turned to my parents. My father was vibrating with rage. "You set us up," he hissed. "I did not set you up, Dad," I said. "I just introduced some quality control." My mother was staring at me with a look of pure horror. Not because I had trapped them, but because she realized, for the first time, that I wasn't just defending myself, I was hunting them. "Get out," I said, "and take your tuna noodle with you." My father grabbed the blue folder. He pointed a finger at me. "You are making a mistake. Ellie." "A huge mistake. You think you are clever? You think this little stunt matters? We have the money. We have the leverage. You are going to rot in jail." "Maybe," I said, "but I won't be lonely, because I am starting to think there is plenty of room in that cell for all of us." He slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I looked at Lena. She was still writing in her book. "Did you get that?" I asked. "Every word," she said. She closed the book. That man was terrified. "Ellie, he knows he is cooked." I looked at the empty space where my parents had been standing. This was not over. They would come back harder. They would unleash Dylan. They would use the trust to bankrupt me. But for the first time since the detectives walked into my office, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the prosecution. The knock on the door was different this time. It was not the frantic pounding of my mother or the authoritative thud of my father. It was a hesitant, rhythmic rapping, followed by a pause. I checked the monitor I had set up in the hallway. They were back. My parents stood there, looking grim and determined, but they had brought reinforcements. Dylan was standing behind them. I had not seen my brother in 6 months. He looked terrible. His usually perfectly gelled hair was limp, and his suit jacket hung loose around his shoulders, as if he had lost 15 pounds in a week. He was staring at his shoes, refusing to look at the camera, refusing to look at the door, and behind him, clutching his leather bag like a shield, was Calvin Dorr. They had dragged him back. Despite the disaster of the previous attempt, or perhaps because of it, they had forced a do-over. They were betting everything on the idea that I would not turn away my own brother. I opened the door. "Ellie," my mother said immediately. Her voice was tight, high-pitched. "We brought Dylan. He wanted to see you. He wanted to explain why this is so important." I looked at Dylan. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Hey, Elle," he croaked. "Come in," I said. I stepped back. I let the wolf pack into my sanctuary. They filed into the living room. The air instantly became heavy, smelling of my father's expensive cologne and the sour scent of Dylan's fear. Calvin went straight to the dining table, avoiding my gaze entirely. He started laying out papers with trembling hands. "We are not going to waste time today," my father said. He did not sit down. He stood by the window, blocking the light. "We are going to get this signed, and we are going to end this nightmare. Calvin is here to witness it. Dylan is here to tell you that we are all in this together." I looked at Dylan. "Is that why you are here? Dylan? To tell me we are in this together?" Dylan flinched. He looked at our mother, who gave him a sharp, imperceptible nod. "Yeah, Elle," he said. He sounded like a bad actor reading off a teleprompter. It is a family matter. We just need to protect the trust. Mom and Dad say, if you sign this, everything goes back to normal. I will pay you back. I promise." He repeated the text message verbatim. "I will pay you back." "How?" I asked. How will you pay me back for a felony conviction? Dylan, are you going to serve the time for me on weekends? Dylan opened his mouth, but my father cut him off. Enough, my father barked. Read the document. Ellie, Calvin is on a schedule. I walked to the table. Calvin had already stamped the document. The purple ink was fresh, glistening on the page. He hadn't even watched me sign it yet, and he had already stamped it. I looked at the header. Confession of guilt and waiver of rights. I looked at Calvin. You pre-stamped this? I asked. Calvin wiped sweat from his forehead. It saves time. I verified your identity last time. We are good. You did not verify my identity last time. I said, You ran away. Just sign it, my mother shrieked. She was vibrating with tension. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. I pulled out a chair and sat down. I picked up the pen. The room went silent. They thought they had me. They thought Dylan's sad eyes and the pressure of the moment had finally broken me. I will sign, I said softly. My mother let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Oh, thank God. But, I continued, my voice hardening. I have one condition. My father stepped forward. No conditions, just one. I said, I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was a single sheet I had typed up that morning. I want a family statement, I said. I placed it on the table next to the confession. It is very simple. It just says that we are all here voluntarily, that no threats were made, and that no promises of financial reward were exchanged for this confession. If this is truly about family unity, you should have no problem signing it. My father snatched the paper. He read it. His face turned a dark, violent shade of purple. I am not signing this garbage, he spat. No threats? You ungrateful little... He crumpled the paper and threw it on the floor. There is the coercion, I said calmly. I looked at the clock. It was exactly 10 o'clock. The doorbell rang. My parents froze. My father looked at the door, then back at me with a look of pure betrayal. Who is that? He hissed. I stood up. That is the witness to your refusal. I said. I walked to the door. I could feel their eyes burning holes in my back. I opened it. Lena Park stood there. She was wearing a trench coat and holding her journal. She looked calm, professional, and utterly unbothered by the tension radiating from the apartment. Good morning, Ms. Russell, she said. I am here for the ten-a-mum notarization of the possession acknowledgement. I stepped aside. Please come in. Lena. Lena walked into the room. She stopped when she saw the crowd. She looked at Calvin, who looked like he was about to faint. Hello again. Mr. Door, she said pleasantly. Calvin made a squeaking sound. He started shoving papers back into his bag. I am done here. I have to go. Sit down. Calvin, my father roared. You are not going anywhere until she signs. Lena turned to my father. Sir, you cannot force a notary to stay, and you certainly cannot force a signer to sign. That is kidnapping and coercion. I am logging everyone present in the room as of 10:01 a.m. She opened her book. She wrote down my father's name, my mother's name, Dylan's name, and Calvin's name. This meeting is now a matter of public record, Lena announced. I turned to my parents. I am not signing the confession. I said, I never was. My mother looked at me with wild eyes. You lied to us? I learned from the best, I said. But since you are here, and since we have two notaries present, there is something I do want to sign. I reached into my own folder and pulled out a document. It was titled Affidavit of Historical Record Possession. It was a trap, disguised as a peace offering. I held it out to my mother. Look, Mom, I know you are worried about the trust. I know you think I am being difficult, but I want to show the court that you guys have always looked out for me. She blinked, confused by the sudden shift in tone. What is this? It is just a statement acknowledging that you kept my old files safe. I lied smoothly. It says that for the last 5 years, you have been the custodians of my old driver's license, my birth certificate, and my social security card. It proves you were protecting my identity, not stealing it. My mother looked at the paper. It seemed harmless. It just said that Marla and Kent Russell had possession of Eleanor Russell's personal identification documents for safekeeping. If you sign this, I said, I will promise not to tell the prosecutor that you yelled at me today. My mother looked at my father. He was pacing, furious, but he wasn't looking at the paper. He just wanted to leave. Sign it and let's get out of here. He snapped. She is wasting our time. My mother picked up the pen. She looked at me. You promise? I promise I will use this document exactly as it is intended. I said. She signed. Lena stepped forward. Do you acknowledge this signature is yours? She asked my mother. Yes, my mother said impatiently. Lena stamped it. Thank you, I said. I took the paper. My father grabbed my mother's arm. We are leaving. You have made a massive mistake. Ellie, you have declared war on your own blood. He dragged my mother toward the door. Calvin scrambled after them, looking like a rat fleeing a sinking ship. Dylan was the last one to move. He stood there for a second, looking at me. His eyes were filled with tears. Come on. Dylan, my father shouted from the hallway. Dylan walked past me. He didn't say a word. But as he brushed by my shoulder, he stumbled slightly. His hand brushed against my hand. I felt something sharp scratch my palm. I looked down. He had pressed a small, folded piece of stiff paper into my hand. It felt like a business card or a scrap of a file folder. I closed my fingers around it. I watched them leave. The door slammed shut. The silence rushed back in, ringing in my ears. I looked at Lena. Did we get it? I asked. We got it, she said. She pointed to the document in my hand. That affidavit? That is the nail in the coffin. Ellie, I looked at the scrap of paper Dylan had given me. I unfolded it. It was torn from the corner of a menu or a placemat. On it, in Dylan's shaky, distinctive all-caps handwriting, were 4 words and a number. North Pine, Unit 612, Cedar Lofts. I stared at the note. Cedar Lofts. That was a new luxury apartment complex downtown. North Pine had a physical address. Graham Voss looked at the affidavit my mother had signed with a mixture of disbelief and glee. He sat back in his chair, holding the paper up to the light as if it were a rare gemstone. She actually signed this? He asked. She admitted, in front of a notary, that she had possession of your expired IDs and personal records. She thought it proved she was a good mother. I said, she thought she was proving she took care of my things. Graham laughed, a dry barking sound. She just handed us the means. Ellie, in a fraud case, you need means, motive, and opportunity. The motive is the money. The opportunity was the lack of oversight. And this? This is the means. This proves they had the physical tools, the IDs, the social security numbers, to open those accounts without you present. He placed the document in the defense pile. Now, tell me about this note, he said. I showed him the scrap of paper. Dylan gave it to me. He slipped it to me when our parents weren't looking. Cedar Lofts, Graham said. Unit 612. That sounds like a residential address, or a shell. I said. Graham picked up his phone. I have an investigator, an ex-cop named Miller. No relation to the detective on your case. I'm going to send him down there. We need to know what is behind door number 612 before we tell the police. If we send the police and it's empty, we look like we are chasing ghosts. Do it, I said. 2 days later, I sat in Graham's office again. The investigator, a man named Miller who smelled of tobacco and rain, was sitting on the corner of the desk. It is not an apartment, Miller said. He tossed a folder of photos onto the desk. I picked them up. The first photo showed the exterior of Cedar Lofts. It was a trendy brick building with a coffee shop on the ground floor. The second photo showed the lobby. There was a wall of brass mailboxes. Unit 612 is a private mailbox suite, Miller explained. It is a commercial mail receiving agency that rents out boxes that look like apartment addresses, so businesses can appear legitimate. Who rents it? Graham asked. Miller smirked. He pulled a photocopy of a rental agreement from his jacket pocket. I have a friend at the management company, A $50 bill goes a long way. He slid the paper over. Tenant. North Pine Consulting. Contact person. Dylan Russell. Payment method. Cash. I stared at my brother's name. Dylan. I whispered, but look at the forwarding instructions. Miller said. He pointed to the bottom of the page. Forward all packages to Briar Glen Self-Storage, Unit B4, Storage. Graham said. We went to the storage facility. Miller continued. Obviously. I could not go inside the unit without a warrant, but I talked to the manager. He says Unit B4 is paid for in cash. Every month. By a guy who drives a black SUV, my father's car. So, Graham said, piecing it together. They use the mailbox to collect the checks from the renewal fund. Then they forward the mail to the storage unit. That is where they keep the records. That is where the paper trail lives. We need to get into that storage unit. I said. Graham nodded. We need a preservation order. We need to freeze that unit before they can clean it out. He turned to his computer and started typing furiously. I am going to file an emergency motion. I am going to cite the mailbox evidence and the affidavit. I am going to argue that there is imminent risk of destruction of evidence. Will the judge sign it? I asked. Graham paused. He looked at me. The prosecutor is going to scream. They are going to say you are fabricating this to shift blame. They are going to say Dylan is a victim you are trying to frame. But we have the note. We have the connection. He hit print. I am filing it. The backlash was immediate and nuclear. Graham filed the motion at 2 p.m. By 4 p.m. The prosecutor had filed an objection, calling my claims fanciful and desperate, but the real explosion didn't happen in the courtroom. It happened on my phone. At 5:30, my Aunt Sarah called. I hadn't spoken to Aunt Sarah in 6 months, but she was the matriarch of the extended Russell clan. She was the one who organized the Thanksgiving potlucks and the 4th of July barbecues. I answered the phone, thinking maybe she had heard the truth. Hello? Ellie Marie Russell. She boomed. Her voice was shaking with rage. I cannot believe what I'm hearing. Aunt Sarah? I said. Your mother just called me. She said, she is in hysterics. She says you are suing them? She says you are trying to steal the family trust? I felt the blood drain from my face. They had twisted the narrative again. They had taken my defense and turned it into an attack. Aunt Sarah. That is not true, I said. I am not stealing anything. There is no trust. They framed me for fraud. Don't you lie to me, she shouted. Marla told me everything. She told me how they tried to help you with your debts. She told me about the gambling problem. Gambling problem? I repeated. I didn't even buy lottery tickets. She says you are trying to bankrupt the family out of spite because they cut you off. Sarah continued. After everything they did for you? After they paid for your college? You are going to drag your own brother into court? I didn't gamble. Aunt Sarah! I screamed into the phone. I am innocent. You are a disgrace, she said. Do not bother coming to the reunion. Do not bother calling your cousins. We know who you are now. She hung up. I stared at the phone. My hands were trembling uncontrollably. Then the text started. From my Uncle Mike. Shame on you. From my cousin Jenna. I can't believe you would do this to Dylan. From my grandmother. You have broken my heart. I sat on my couch, the phone buzzing like an angry hornet in my hand. It was a coordinated assault. My parents knew they were losing the legal battle, so they had launched a social one. They were isolating me. They were cutting off every lifeline I had to my history, to my childhood. They were making me an orphan. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. I wanted to curl up in a ball and disappear. The weight of their collective judgment was crushing. It felt like the whole town was standing outside my window, pointing fingers. I started to cry. Not the silent, stoic tears I had shed before, but ugly, heaving sobs. I felt small. I felt dirty. Maybe it would be easier to just sign the paper. Maybe 2 years in prison was better than being hated by everyone I had ever loved. My eyes fell on the coffee table. The white binder sat there. Evidence. I wiped my eyes. I reached out and opened it. I turned the pages. The time-stamped receipt from Summit Harbor, the Uber Eats order from Tessa, the screenshot of the driver's license on the kitchen table, the affidavit my mother had just signed, the note from Dylan, Unit 612. I ran my fingers over the papers. These were not lies. These were cold, hard facts. My Aunt Sarah didn't know about the notary stamp from the wrong county. My Uncle Mike didn't know about the mailbox suite. My grandmother didn't know that her son, my father, had looked me in the eye and told me prison wouldn't kill me. They were reacting to a story, a fiction written by my parents to cover their crimes. But I was writing a different story, and my story had footnotes. I closed the binder. I picked up my phone. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't call them back. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. Then I went to my laptop. I opened a new document. I started typing a list. Witnesses for the evidentiary hearing. 1. Harper Klein, Renewal Fund. 2. Lena Park, Notary Public. 3. Investigator Miller 4. Dylan Russell, subpoena. I added Dylan's name last. It hurt to type it. I knew that by subpoenaing him, I was destroying whatever relationship we had left. I was forcing him to choose between perjury and his parents. But he had slipped me the note. He had given me the breadcrumb. He wanted to be stopped. He was too weak to do it himself. But he had handed me the gun. I printed the list. I clipped it into the binder. The social pressure was agonizing, but it was just noise. The only thing that mattered was the judge. The only thing that mattered was the truth. I went to the window and looked out at the street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Briar Glen. Let them talk. I whispered to the empty room. Let them hate me. When this is over, they will know exactly who the Russells really are, and they will know that I am the only one who told the truth. The conference room in the district attorney's office was windowless and smelled of stale cleaning fluid. It was designed to make you feel small, to make the walls feel like they were closing in. I sat on one side of the laminate table, Graham Voss next to me. On the other side sat Assistant District Attorney Lowe, a man with a perfectly shaved head and eyes that looked at me like I was a column in a spreadsheet that refused to balance. "We are prepared to offer a global resolution," Lowe said. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. I didn't look at the paper. I looked at him. "Count 1. Fraud in the second degree," Lowe recited, his voice flat. "Count 2. Grand larceny. We will drop the identity theft charges and the falsifying business records. You plead guilty to 1 count of grand larceny. You agree to full restitution of the $85,000. And the sentence?" Graham asked, his voice low. 24 months, Lowe said. "State facility. Eligible for parole in 18 with good behavior. 2 years. The phrase echoed in my head. 2 years in prison won't kill you. My father had said it in my kitchen. Now the state of New York was saying it in a conference room. That is a steep offer for a first-time offender with no prior record, Graham said, leaning back, especially considering the evidence we have filed regarding coercion. Lowe sighed. He tapped his pen on the file. "Look, Mr. Voss, I have seen your motion. I have seen the affidavit about the ID cards. It is cute. But juries hate paper crimes. They get bored. They get confused. And when they get confused, they look for the simplest story." He leaned forward, locking eyes with me. "And here is the simplest story. Ms. Russell, your parents, upstanding members of the community, business owners, are prepared to testify that you managed the family finances for years. They will testify that you had access to everything. They will testify that you were struggling with debt. It is 3 against 1. They are lying." I said. Lowe shrugged. "That is for a jury to decide. But if you lose at trial, you are looking at 5 to 7 years. This offer is a gift. It is mercy. Take the 2 years, pay the money, move on with your life." I looked at the paper. Global resolution. It sounded so clinical. It was a contract to sell my future to protect my parents' past. "We reject the offer," Graham said. "We are proceeding to the evidentiary hearing." Lowe picked up his pen. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed, like I was a child who refused to eat her vegetables. "Suit yourself," he said. "But once we start jury selection, the offer is off the table." We walked out of the courthouse into the bright, blinding afternoon. I felt cold despite the sun. Graham led me to a bench near the fountain. He sat down and loosened his tie. "You need to understand what just happened," he said. He looked tired. That was the easy exit. That was the off-ramp. "I am not taking an off-ramp that leads to prison," I said. Graham nodded. "I know. But the hearing next week? That is not an off-ramp. That is a demolition derby." He turned to face me. "Listen to me. Ellie, in a criminal trial, we usually just try to create doubt. But for this hearing, to get this dismissed, or to get the evidence thrown out, we have to prove affirmative misconduct. We have to prove your parents are not just mistaken, but that they are criminals. We have to prove they forged, lied, and framed you." "I know." I said. "Do you?" Graham asked softly. "Once we do this, once I cross-examine your father and accuse him of felony forgery on the record, there is no Sunday dinner. There is no reconciliation. You are severing the limb. You will be an orphan in every way that matters." I looked at the courthouse steps. I saw families walking out together. I saw a mother adjusting her son's collar. I thought about the text messages from my aunt. I thought about the whispers in my apartment hallway. "I am already an orphan." "Graham," I said. "They made me one the minute they decided I was disposable." Graham held my gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Then let us go to war. But if we are going to win, we need to know why. We have the how, the notary, the mailbox, but we need the why. Why did they need $85,000 so badly that they burned their own daughter to get it? Your father's contracting business is steady. It does not add up. We need to talk to Harper Klein again." I said, "I found Harper Klein at a playground near the Renewal Fund's office. She was sitting on a bench, eating a sandwich, watching a group of kids play tag. She looked nervous when she saw me approaching, but she didn't run." "Harper," I said. "Ellie," she said. She put her sandwich down. "I heard you are not taking the plea. News travels fast." I said. Harper looked at her hands. "I have been thinking about what you said, about the voice on the phone, about the dog. It was my mother." "Harper, I know," she whispered. I went back and listened to the voicemails. We record calls for quality assurance. I never listened to them before because I thought I knew who it was. "And?" I asked. "It was not you," she said. The cadence was different, older. "Will you testify to that?" I asked. Harper flinched. She looked around the park, as if she expected someone to be watching from the slide. "I can't," she said. "Why not?" "Harper, an innocent person is going to go to jail, because he told me to stop," she blurted out. "Who?" I asked. "Who told you to stop?" Harper's eyes filled with tears. When the audit started before the police were even involved, I noticed the discrepancies. I noticed the North Pine invoices didn't have the right backup documentation. I started asking questions. I went to the board, and the next day, a community advisor came to my office. He told me that North Pine was a special project. He said it was sensitive. He said if I kept digging, the donors would get spooked and the Renewal Fund would lose its funding. He said I would be responsible for bankrupting the charity. "Who was the advisor?" I asked. I leaned in. "Harper, I need a name." Harper wiped her eyes. "Wesley Darnell." I froze. Wesley Darnell. Everyone in Briar Glen knew the name. He was the golden boy of the local Chamber of Commerce. He was a consultant for half the nonprofits in the county. He sat on the hospital board. He was in the photos at every ribbon-cutting ceremony, smiling with his white teeth and his expensive suits. "Wesley Darnell told you to stop asking about North Pine?" I asked. "Yes," Harper said. "He said he was handling it personally. He said Ellie Russell was a trusted partner." My stomach dropped. Darnell wasn't just covering it up. He was part of the architecture. "Thank you." "Harper," I said. I stood up. "Ellie, wait," Harper said. She grabbed my arm. "Be careful. Wesley Darnell isn't just a consultant. He makes things happen in this town. If he is involved—" "I know," I said. "If he is involved, then my parents aren't just thieves. They are pawns. I went straight to Graham's office. Investigator Miller was there, eating a bagel. Wesley Darnell. I said. Miller stopped chewing. He looked at Graham. The guy on the billboards? Miller asked. The guy running for town council next year? The same. I said. Harper Klein says he shut down her internal investigation. He told her North Pine was a special project. Graham stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He wrote Wesley Darnell in red marker. Okay, Graham said. That changes the gravity. If Darnell is involved, this isn't just a family fraud. This is organized corruption. Miller cracked his knuckles. I will run him, if he is dirty. There is a stain somewhere. It took Miller 4 hours. I paced the office. I drank 3 cups of terrible coffee. Finally, Miller spun his laptop around. Got him, he said. I looked at the screen. It was a spiderweb of public records. Wesley Darnell runs a consulting firm called Darnell Strategies. Miller said, but look at the subsidiaries. He pointed to a list. WD Holdings, Civic Solutions, Blue Spruce Ventures, and look at the filing agents for these companies, Miller said. He clicked on Blue Spruce Ventures. The registered agent was a man named Calvin Dorr. Calvin. I breathed. The notary, Graham said. It gets better, Miller said. I pulled the vendor lists for the county. Darnell Strategies is a prime contractor, but Blue Spruce Ventures is listed as a subcontractor for, wait for it, waste management consulting. And who is the primary vendor for waste management hauling in this district? Miller asked. I shook my head. Russell Contracting. Miller said, your father's company. I stared at the screen. The pieces clicked together with a deafening snap. My father wasn't just stealing money from a charity to pay off debts. He was washing money for Wesley Darnell. Darnell set up the shells. Darnell provided the crooked notary. My father provided the invoices and the labor. And when they got greedy, when they decided to hit the renewal fund, they needed a fresh identity to open a new shell. They couldn't use their own names because they were already vendors, so they used mine. They sold me out to a local politician. I whispered. Graham looked at the board. This is RICO territory. Ellie, this is racketeering. We need proof. I said, we have the connection on paper, but we need someone to say it out loud. We need someone who was in the room. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to her since the disaster with the notary. I answered. I put it on speaker so Miller could record it. Hello? I said. Ellie, my mother said. Her voice was different. It wasn't the frantic, wailing voice she used for the neighbors. It was low, tight, and terrified. What do you want? Mom, we need to meet, she said. Just us. No lawyers, no notaries. I am not meeting you. I said, please, Ellie, we found something in the trust. There is no trust. I said, there is money. She said quickly, we liquidated some assets. We have a cashier's check. For how much? I asked. $50,000. She said. I almost laughed. $50,000. That was the price of my life. That was the discount rate for a daughter. And what do I have to do for this $50,000? I asked. Just accept the plea, she whispered. Please, Ellie, you have to stop the investigation. You have to stop the preservation order on the storage unit. If they open that unit... She stopped. If they open that unit, what happens? I asked. It ruins everyone, she said. Not just us. Everyone. She meant Darnell. She was terrified of what Darnell would do if his files were exposed. I will think about it. I said. I hung up. They are scared, Miller said. They are absolutely terrified. They offered me $50,000. I said, I felt sick. Graham looked at me. That offer is inadmissible as a settlement negotiation usually. But in this context, it is witness tampering. It is bribery. But it also means they know we are close. I said, that night, I went to the grocery store. I didn't need groceries, but I needed to drive. I needed to move. I parked in the back of the lot, under a flickering street lamp. It was raining. A cold, miserable drizzle that blurred the windshield. I was about to put the car in reverse when a shadow moved in my rearview mirror. A figure in a hoodie tapped on my window. I jumped, my hand going to the door lock. It was Dylan. I unlocked the door. He slipped into the passenger seat. He was soaking wet. He smelled of rain and stale cigarettes. He didn't look at me. He stared out the windshield at the carts crashing into each other in the wind. "Did you take the money?" he asked. His voice was hollow. "No," I said. "Good," he said. "It wouldn't have helped anyway." "Why are you here?" "Dylan?" I asked. He rubbed his face with his hands. I saw his fingernails were bitten down to the quick. "Mom and Dad are losing it," he said. "When you filed that motion for the storage unit, Dad punched a hole in the drywall. Tell me about Unit B4. "Dylan," he laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "It is just boxes. Boxes and boxes of invoices. North Pine. Blue spruce? Ironwood? Ironwood?" I asked. "Another shell?" "Yeah." He said, "That one was mine. Or, it was supposed to be mine." Dylan turned to look at me. His face was pale, ghostly in the street lamp light. "The trust isn't real. Elle, you know that, right?" I suspected. I said, "It is just a story," he said. "A story they tell us to keep us in line. Do this for the trust. Protect the trust. It doesn't exist. There is no money. There never was. It all goes to him. To Wesley Darnell?" I asked. Dylan nodded. He flinched at the name. "He runs it all. Dad is just a glorified subcontractor. Darnell sets up the deals. Dad does the paperwork. And Darnell takes 40% off the top." "And North Pine?" I asked. "North Pine was sloppy." Dylan said, "Darnell needed cash fast for his campaign. He told Dad to hit the renewal fund. Dad said he didn't have a clean identity to use." Darnell said, "Use the girl." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Use the girl. And you let them." I said, "You knew." Dylan started to cry. Silent, shaking tears. "I work at Lakeward Auto. Darnell owns the land the dealership sits on. He knows the owner. He told me. He told me if I didn't help with the tech stuff, if I didn't Photoshop the invoices, I would be out. No job. No references. So you sold me for a job at a car dealership?" I asked. "I thought they would pay it back." Dylan pleaded. "Dad swore it was a loan. He said we would pay it back before the audit, but the money disappeared. Darnell took it. I looked at my brother. He was pathetic. He was weak, but he was also the only witness I had who knew the whole truth." "Dylan," I said, "you have to tell my lawyer." He recoiled, pressing himself against the door. "No, no way. I can't. You have to." I said, "If you don't, I am going to prison. Is that what you want?" "If I talk, Darnell will destroy me." Dylan whispered, "He will ruin Dad. He will burn the whole family down." "The family is already burnt." "Dylan!" I shouted. "The house is on fire. I am just trying to get out before the roof collapses." Dylan shook his head. I can't testify. I will deny it." He reached for the door handle. "Dylan, wait." I grabbed his wet sleeve. He pulled away. "North Pine is real," he said. "The location, the storage unit if you get in there. You win, but leave me out of it." He opened the door and ran out into the rain. I watched him go. He was running like a child who had broken a vase, terrified of the punishment, leaving his sister to take the blame. I drove to Graham's office the next morning. My eyes felt gritty. Graham listened to my recounting of the parking lot meeting in silence. "So we have confirmation." Graham said, "It is Darnell. It is a criminal enterprise, and Dylan is the weak link, but he won't testify." I said, "He is too scared." Graham nodded. He started pacing. "Here is the situation. Ellie, we have a conditional path. We can go to the prosecutor with what we have. The connection to Darnell, the shell companies, the investigator's report. We can offer them a trade. You give them Darnell, and they drop the charges against you. That sounds good." I said, "But," Graham cautioned, "without Dylan's testimony, or without the contents of that storage unit, it is all circumstantial. If the prosecutor doesn't buy it, If they think we are just throwing mud at a prominent citizen to save your skin, they might pull the plea deal entirely. And then we go to trial with nothing but your word against your parents, Graham said. And if we lose, there is no 24 months. The judge will hammer you for wasting the court's time. You could be looking at the full 5 years. He stopped pacing. Or, he said, we take the deal now. The prosecutor called this morning. The offer stands until 5 p.m. Today, 24 months. It is safe. It is guaranteed. You do your time. You come out. You start over. I looked at the window. I watched the traffic below. 2 years. I could disappear for 2 years. I could read books. I could keep my head down. And Darnell would become a councilman. My parents would keep using people. Dylan would keep living his lie. And I would always be the felon. I would always be the one who admitted to something I didn't do. I thought about the family statement my father refused to sign. I thought about the tuna noodle casserole. I thought about the notary stamp from the wrong county. They had used every tool of the legal system to trap me. They had used paperwork as a weapon. I turned to Graham. I'm not taking the plea. I said, Graham exhaled. Are you sure? I am sure. I want the evidentiary hearing. I want to put my mother on the stand. I want to ask her about the IDs. I want to ask her about the trust. And if Dylan doesn't show up? Graham asked. Then we use the storage unit. I said, the judge hasn't granted the preservation order yet. Graham reminded me, we might get there and find it empty. Then we fight with what we have. I said, I am done being safe. Graham, safety is what got me here. I stayed quiet to be safe. I took the blame to be safe. I stood up. Reject the plea. Tell the prosecutor we will see him in court, and tell him to bring a very large notepad, because we have a lot of names to name. Graham smiled. It was a grim smile, but it was real. Okay, he said. I will draft the rejection. He picked up the phone. As he dialed, I felt a strange lightness. The fear was still there, but it was different. It wasn't the paralyzing fear of the unknown. It was the focused fear of a soldier going over the top of the trench. I was going to lose my family. I was going to lose my reputation. I might even lose my freedom. But I was going to take the truth with me. And if I went down, I was going to make sure the splash was big enough to drown them all. The morning of the hearing was brisk and cold, the kind of day that felt like it could snap a dry twig in two. I stood outside the heavy oak doors of courtroom 3B, checking my reflection in the glass of a display case. I wore a navy blazer I had bought at a thrift store 3 days ago because I wanted to look like someone who respected the law. Even if the law was currently trying to swallow me whole. Graham Voss stood beside me. He was checking his watch, his face a mask of granite concentration. Are you ready? He asked. I am not sure. I said. I felt lightheaded, as if my body was mostly helium. Just remember, Graham said, do not react, no matter what they say, no matter what lies they tell. You stay stone still. You are the statue. They are the pigeons. Let them make the mess. He opened the door. We walked in. The gallery was fuller than I expected. Local reporters were there, probably sniffing around because of the Wesley Darnell rumors my investigator had quietly leaked. And then I saw them. My parents were sitting in the front row directly behind the prosecutor's table. They were putting on a masterclass in performance art. My mother was wearing a modest black dress, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes red and swollen. My father was wearing his dark Sunday suit, his arm draped protectively around her shoulders. They were whispering to each other, loud enough for the people around them to hear. Our poor daughter, my mother murmured, shaking her head. I just hope she gets the help she needs. My father nodded solemnly. We will stand by her. Marla, no matter what she has done, they looked like saints. They looked like grieving parents who were being forced to watch their wayward child face the consequences of a tragic mistake. If I didn't know them, if I hadn't seen the venom in my father's eyes when he threw my peace offering on the floor, I would have believed them. I sat down at the defense table. I didn't look back. I fixed my eyes on the judge's bench. All rise, the bailiff called out. Judge Vance entered. He was an older man with bushy eyebrows and a reputation for hating wasted time. He sat down and adjusted his glasses. "We are here for an evidentiary hearing in the matter of the People versus Russell," he said. "The defense has filed a motion to suppress evidence based on allegations of coercion and fraud. Mr. Lowe, you may begin." Assistant District Attorney Lowe stood up. He looked confident. He buttoned his jacket and walked to the podium. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth and practiced, "the defense is trying to weave a complicated story to distract from a very simple set of facts. The defendant, Eleanor Russell, stole $85,000 from a local charity. She opened a bank account in her name. She authorized invoices. She spent the money." Lowe picked up a stack of papers. "We have the contracts, signed by the defendant. We have the bank records, linked to the defendant's social security number. We have a confession of judgment prepared by her family, which she verbally agreed to sign before changing her mind. The defense claims coercion, but the only coercion here is the defendant's greed forcing her family into this humiliating spotlight." He dropped the papers on the table. It was a solid opening. It was logical. It was boring. Graham stood up. He didn't walk to the podium. He stood by the table, his hands resting on the white binder we had assembled. "Your Honor," Graham said. His voice was gravelly, carrying to the back of the room without shouting. "The prosecution is right about one thing. This is a simple case, but it is not a case of theft. It is a case of identity theft, and the thief is sitting in the front row of the gallery." A murmur went through the room. My father stiffened. My mother gasped audibly. Graham picked up the first document from our binder. "Exhibit A," Graham said, "a notarized affidavit from Eleanor Russell, dated and time-stamped at 8:45 in the morning on the day of the alleged confession." He walked the document to the judge. "Your Honor, please note the time. This document was created, signed, and notarized by an independent third-party witness before the defendant's parents arrived at her apartment. In this document, Ms. Russell explicitly states that her parents are attempting to coerce her into taking the blame for a crime she did not commit." Lowe jumped up. "Objection. Hearsay. Self-serving statement." "It is a contemporaneous record of state of mind," Graham countered smoothly. "It proves that the defendant's refusal to sign the confession wasn't a last-minute panic. It was a premeditated act of defense. She was documenting the threat before the threat walked through her door." Judge Vance looked at the document. He looked at the timestamp. "I will allow it," the judge said. Graham didn't smile. He just reached into the binder again. "Now, let us talk about the signatures." Graham said, "The prosecution hangs its entire case on 17 vendor documents signed by Ellie Russell." He pulled out the blow-up of the vendor authorization form. He placed it on an easel facing the judge. "This document is dated October 14th, Graham said. "It bears a notary stamp from one Calvin Dorr. Commissioned in Westchester County. The location of the signing is listed as White Plains, New York." Graham turned to me. "Ms. Russell," he asked, "where were you on October 14th? I stood up. "I was in Briar Glen, at the dentist," I said clearly. Graham held up a new piece of paper. "I have here a certified dental record from Dr. Evans. It shows that on October 14th, from 9 in the morning until 11:30, Ms. Russell was undergoing emergency root canal surgery under sedation. She was physically incapable of being in White Plains to sign this document." Lowe stood up slowly. "Your Honor, a date mistake by a notary does not invalidate the entire body of evidence. It does when the notary is a habitual fraud." Graham snapped. He slapped another document onto the easel. "This is the notary log of Calvin Dorr, obtained via subpoena yesterday afternoon. Your Honor will notice something interesting. On October 14th, Mr. Dorr's log shows no entries. Not for Ellie Russell. Not for anyone." The courtroom was silent. "Furthermore," Graham continued, his voice rising, "Mr. Dorr is commissioned in Westchester, yet the defendant lives in Rockland. Her parents live in Rockland. Why would a routine vendor form for a Briar Glen charity be notarized in White Plains?" Graham turned to look at my father. "Unless," Graham said, The person who arranged the notarization didn't want to use a local notary who might ask questions, unless they used a friendly notary who stamps whatever is put in front of him. I watched my father. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw muscle jumping rhythmically. It was the first time I had ever seen him look truly afraid. He wasn't the king of the castle anymore. He was just a man in a cheap suit wondering if he had shredded enough paper. Judge Vance leaned forward. He looked over his glasses at the prosecutor. "Mr. Lowe," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet. "False notarization is a Class E felony in this state. If your evidence relies on forged instruments, we are going to have a very serious problem." Lowe tugged at his collar. "We are looking into the discrepancy, Your Honor." "You had better do more than look," the judge warned. Graham wasn't done. "Defense calls Harper Klein," he announced. Harper walked through the doors. She looked terrified. Her hands were trembling as she took the oath. She sat in the witness box, looking like she wanted to disappear into the wood paneling. Graham approached her gently. "Ms. Klein, you are the finance manager for the Briar Glen Renewal Fund, correct?" "Yes," Harper whispered. "And you initiated the internal investigation into the North Pine Consulting invoices?" "Yes." "Why did you stop that investigation?" Graham asked. Harper looked at the prosecutor. She looked at my parents. My father was glaring at her, a silent order to shut up burning in his eyes. I was told to stop," Harper said. "By whom?" Graham asked. Harper took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. "By Wesley Darnell," she said. A gasp went through the room. The reporters in the back row started typing furiously on their phones. Wesley Darnell was royalty in this town. Accusing him was like accusing the mayor. "Can you elaborate?" Graham asked. "He came to my office," Harper said, her voice gaining a little strength. "He told me North Pine was a special project. He said if I kept asking questions about the invoices, I would spook the donors. He said it would end the fundraising. He told me to let it go." "And did he mention the defendant?" Graham asked. "He said Ellie Russell was handling it." Harper said, But what?" "But I realized later that I never actually spoke to Ellie Russell." Harper said, "The woman on the phone, the one who called to authorize the transfers. She knew things about the family. She knew about a childhood dog. But her voice was different. Different how?" "It was older," Harper said. She looked directly at my mother. It sounded like her. My mother let out a sharp cry. "That is a lie." She jumped to her feet. "I never called anyone." "Sit down, ma'am," the bailiff barked. Judge Vance banged his gavel. "Order. One more outburst and you will be removed." My mother sank back into her seat, sobbing loudly into her handkerchief. But the performance was cracking. It wasn't sorrow anymore. It was panic. Graham turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we have testimony linking a political figure to the suppression of this investigation. We have testimony suggesting the defendant was impersonated by a family member. Now, I would like to show the court where the money actually went." Graham introduced the Cedar Loft's evidence, the photos of the mailbox, the rental agreement in Dylan's name, the forwarding address to the storage unit. Lowe objected immediately. "Objection!" Lowe shouted. "This is speculation. We have no verification of what is in that storage unit. We have a preservation order pending." Graham argued, and the connection is clear. The checks went to the mailbox. The mailbox forwards to the storage unit. The storage unit is paid for by the father's company. This establishes the chain of custody for the stolen funds. Judge Vance rubbed his chin. "I will admit the existence of the mailing address," the judge ruled, "but without the contents of the unit. You cannot speculate on what is inside. It was a partial win. We had the path, but we didn't have the treasure." Then the doors at the back of the courtroom opened with a loud creak. Everyone turned. Dylan stood there. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His shirt was untucked. He was holding a crumpled baseball cap in his hands. He looked from our parents to me, his eyes wide and frightened. He walked past the bar. He stood in the middle of the aisle. I need to say something," he stammered. The judge looked at him. "Who are you?" "I am Dylan Russell," he said, "the defendant's brother." Lowe stood up. Your Honor, this witness is not on the list. Graham looked at me. He looked surprised, but he recovered instantly. Your Honor, the defense moves to allow Mr. Russell to testify. He has direct knowledge of the facts. The judge looked at Dylan. He saw a man on the edge of a cliff. Take the stand, the judge said. Dylan walked to the witness box. He sat down heavily. He didn't look at our parents. He looked at his hands. Graham approached him. Dylan, Graham said softly, did you open a mailbox at Cedar Lofts under the name North Pine Consulting? Dylan took a shaky breath. I can't answer that without a lawyer. I don't want to go to jail. Graham nodded. He expected that. He pivoted. Let me ask you this. Dylan, did your parents speak to you about your sister's legal situation? Yes, Dylan whispered. What did they tell you? They told me Ellie had to take the blame. Why? Graham asked. Because she owed the family, Dylan said. His voice cracked. Dad said the business was in trouble. He said Darnell. He said the partner would ruin us if the truth came out. They said Ellie was strong. They said she could handle 2 years. Lowe was on his feet. Objection. Hearsay. It is an admission against interest. Graham shouted back. He is implicating himself in a conspiracy. Judge Vance held up a hand. Overruled. Continue. Graham looked at Dylan. Did your sister know? Graham asked. Did Ellie know about North Pine before the police came? Dylan shook his head. Tears were streaming down his face now. No, he sobbed. She didn't know anything. We used her old files. Mom had her old license. We just picked her because she was clean, because we thought she wouldn't fight back. The courtroom erupted. Reporters were shouting questions. The judge was banging the gavel. My father was purple with rage. He was standing up, pointing a finger at Dylan. You traitor, you weak, pathetic little... Sit down, the bailiff yelled, moving toward my father, and then my mother stood up. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure, ugly fury. She looked at me, not at Dylan, at me. You did this, she screamed, her voice piercing the chaos. You selfish, ungrateful girl. You are trying to destroy us. She pointed a shaking finger at me. We did everything for you. And this is how you repay us? By dragging us into court? By exposing the account? She was losing control. She was spewing words, trying to hurt me, trying to justify herself. I never wanted to use that account, she shrieked. It was a hassle. I had to drive to 3 different branches just to find one that wouldn't ask for a second form of ID. I told Kent we should have just used the online portal, but he was paranoid. The room went instantly silent. Even the judge froze. Graham turned slowly to look at my mother. He didn't need to ask a question. She had just answered it. She had just admitted to driving to the banks. She had admitted to shopping for a branch that had lacked security. She had admitted to the mechanics of the crime in open court. My mother looked around. She saw the faces of the jury. She saw the shock on the prosecutor's face. She saw my father bury his face in his hands. She realized what she had done. Her hand flew to her mouth. She slumped back into the bench, the fight draining out of her instantly. Judge Vance stared at her for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he looked at the prosecutor. Mr. Lowe, the judge said. His voice was icy. I am halting these proceedings, Your Honor. Lowe started, but he looked sick. Do not Your Honor me, Vance snapped. We have credible testimony of witness tampering. We have an admission of bank fraud from the gallery. We have a notary who has vanished. This is not a trial anymore. This is a crime scene. He slammed his gavel. I am ordering the sheriff's department to take custody of all evidence presented today. I am ordering an immediate expansion of the investigation to include Marla and Kent Russell. And this, Mr. Darnell. He looked at me. Ms. Russell. Your charges are not dismissed yet. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but I am releasing you on your own recognizance, and I am issuing an immediate order of protection. Your parents are to have no contact with you. None. He stood up. Court is adjourned. The bailiff moved toward the gallery. My father didn't resist. He looked defeated, shrunken. My mother was weeping again. But this time, nobody was buying it. Dylan sat in the witness box, his head in his hands. Graham turned to me. He let out a long breath. "We did it," he said softly. I looked at the chaos behind me. I saw the prosecutor packing his bag aggressively, already on the phone, probably calling his boss to explain how he had almost sent an innocent woman to prison for a political scheme. I looked at my parents. They were arguing with the bailiff. They looked small. They looked petty. They didn't look like the giants who had controlled my life for 33 years. They looked like criminals. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. But I didn't fall. "Is it over?" I asked. "Not yet," Graham said. "There will be grand juries. There will be trials. Darnell will fight. Your parents will turn on each other. It is going to be messy." He smiled. "But the line to prison? It isn't pointing at you anymore." I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was bright. The air smelled of floor wax and freedom. I walked past the reporters. I walked past the staring strangers. I pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out onto the courthouse steps. The sun was shining. The traffic was humming. The world was moving on. I took a deep breath. It tasted like cold air and exhaust fumes. It was the sweetest thing I had ever tasted. I wasn't Ellie the fixer anymore. I wasn't Ellie the scapegoat. I was Ellie Russell, and I had the receipts. Thank you for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the dark corners of family loyalty and the sharp edge of the legal system. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice served cold. I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me where you are listening from. And share your thoughts on Ellie's decision. Did she go too far? Or did she do exactly what was necessary? Let me know in English in the comments. Until next time.